Everybody. So today we are going to be talking about asteroids out of bounds, what this might mean if you've got asteroids out of bounds in your natal chart, or if you're looking at a natal chart that has asteroids out of bounds, what this could mean. I've done a video on out of bounds planets before. It was like a year and a half ago. But I will link it to this video because it will go into more about what out of bounds anything means than I'm going to do here. So it'll give some context to what the hell I'm talking about in case I don't give much context here. But I got a comment on this particular video recently where somebody mentioned that they have Vesta out of bounds and they have Nessus out of bounds, and they thought it'd be fun to hear more about what these could mean out of bounds. Now, I'm not going to go into Nessus out of bounds because I haven't done a video on Nessus period on this channel. Funny that they brought Nessus up though, because Nessus was like the next asteroid centaur that I was going to deep dive into, go into like the mythology and how to read it in a natal chart with the mythology and all of that involved. So I might have to do that sometime soon here, since Nessus again has kind of been brought to my attention, if you will. But I will definitely go into Vesta, definitely go into Pallas and Ceres and Juno, the asteroid goddesses. Talk about what those can mean out of bounds. But first, one thing I didn't do in the original video about out of bounds planets was to show how to really find it. I mean, I did show on my iPad, but you couldn't really see it that well. So I'm going to show you how to find these, how you can find anything out of bounds in a chart. Okay, so this is my natal chart, right? So you go on astro.com. Oh, and by the way, if you're on anything but astro.com, I have no fucking clue how to find the declinations. None. So for this, if you're wanting to follow along with me, go to astro.com, pull your chart. And then once it's pulled, make sure that you also have the asteroids pulled as well. And then you'll go to additional tables. And you will end up with the natal chart data sheet. And you'll want to go here to where it says declination. And you're looking for anything on your planet positions table. You'll want to see if there's anything that has a declination of more than 23 degrees, 26 minutes, and 22 seconds north or south. And anything that is beyond 23 degrees, 26 minutes, and 22 seconds is considered out of bounds. Now, there are certain things that never go out of bounds. Sun never goes out of bounds. Saturn never goes out of bounds. Neptune never goes out of bounds. The nodal axis never goes out of bounds. And an asteroid that never goes out of bounds is Chiron. Chiron never goes out of bounds either. But the other, and Jupiter does go out of bounds, but it doesn't go out of bounds very often. And Uranus will go out of bounds, but Uranus usually won't go or doesn't go beyond 24 degrees declination. So while it can, so you won't see it like way out. Like you can see that you can see the moon way out of bounds. But like something like Uranus will not go that far out of bounds, but it does go out of bounds. So like here on mine, the moon is out of bounds at a declination of 27 degrees, 19 minutes. Venus is out of bounds at 24 degrees, 28 minutes. Uranus is out of bounds at 23 degrees, 31 minutes. And Ceres is out of bounds at 27 degrees and 58 minutes. So that's how you would look to see if you have anything at all out of bounds in the chart. Let me go ahead and stop sharing. I didn't pull Vesta on mine. Oops. But my Vesta is not out of bounds, so I wouldn't have been highlighting it anyway. But so when you have something out of bounds, it means it can kind of function how it wants. how it feels like functioning, how it wants to function. Meaning it doesn't like look like the cookie cutter kind of descriptions that you'll read for say like I don't know like Ceres in like I don't know, let's say you got Ceres in Cancer or something. You go online and you read about what it can mean when you got Ceres in Cancer. If you got Ceres out of bounds, it really may not fit what you're reading. Right? Because these cookie cutter definitions of things just generally don't fit with out of bounds anything. Out of bounds planets are they can be or out of bounds asteroids even they can be thought of as I like to think of them as I think they're kind of liberated. I really do. I think there's a liberation to them because they can do whatever the fuck they want. They are a little bit more wild. They are wild cards. They are a little bit more unpredictable, a little bit more erratic. They can be, and liberated because they're not as, they don't have to function a specific way, and they can kind of function. I think of them as being rather flexible in that way, out of bounds anything, because they're just the definitions that you'll read for out of bounds, like I don't know, like I said, like an out of bounds Ceres and Cancer definitions for Ceres and Cancer may not, or normal ideas for Ceres and Cancer may not fit for this Ceres and Cancer person if their Ceres is out of bounds. Some of it may, some of it may not. Now, when I look at out of bounds anything, something that I like to do is I like to look at the persona chart for the out of bounds planet or asteroid or whatever in question. I will show you this too, how to find this. Because I also, because out of bounds planets can be so, they can be so wild that it can be hard to delineate them. It really can be. So like, I don't know, like I've got Ceres out of bounds, so I'll use that as an example. You can look at what Ceres is doing in the chart, what aspects it's making in the natal chart, and get an idea of perhaps how Ceres might function. But you also have to take into account that like that out of bounds quality is going to make it a little, it's going to function differently. It's going to have the propensity to function differently, more so than a planet that's in bounds. So what I've been doing with this is I have been going to create persona charts for out of bounds planets or out of bounds asteroids or out of bounds anything. So what you would do is you would do what I just did, go to the persona chart thing, and then go down here to find whatever planet or asteroid or whatever's out of bounds, and then click go. And it will create the persona chart for the planet or asteroid in question. So in this case, this is the Ceres persona chart. Now, I do feel like looking at persona charts, they can give you a deeper understanding of any planet or any asteroid in your chart. But I think for things that are out of bounds, I think it's really helpful to look at them. At the persona charts, really, really helpful to give you a better, a more layered understanding of how this planet or asteroid might function. You just have to keep in mind that when you're looking at a persona chart, that it's not an actual natal chart. It's a natal chart for that planet or that asteroid. It's not, you know what I'm saying? Like you just have to kind of shift the lens and think about it that way. But I think they can be very useful in seeing how that out of bounds planet or out of bounds asteroid might be most inclined to function and kind of what way it might be most inclined to go. How erratic is it actually? How volatile is it actually? How genius is it actually? And you know what I mean? Because all of those are sorts of keywords for out of bounds anything. Let me go and stop sharing. Okay, So I think that can be a really useful tool adding on to how to read out of bounds planets or asteroids in general. I definitely encourage people with out of bounds anything to do that, pull the persona charts for those out of bounds planets or asteroids to get a more layered look, a deeper look at how they might function. Yeah. So if you have like, we'll start with Vesta out of bounds. If you have Vesta out of bounds, Vesta is things like devotion, one's craft. It's like the keeper of the home and the hearth. And Vesta, it's also sacred sexuality. And kind of like what's worthy, because not just anybody could go into Vesta's temple. Not just anybody was allowed in. So there is like a sense of worthiness there with Vesta as well. So I could almost see, because these out of bounds, anything can be more erratic, because it doesn't have to function like it's supposed to. Out of bounds Vesta, you might find somebody who they could be like hyper devoted to things, hyper devoted, hyper devoted to their craft, hyper devoted even to sacred sexuality and things like that. And they could also be the sort of person that never feels like anyone is worthy of entering the temple, so to speak. All the way over to a complete undervaluing of like who's worthy or what's worthy. I could see that coming into play as well. I could. I could also see Vesta out of bounds swinging to like a complete lack of devotion or a complete lack of engaging in sacred sexuality. And it might be one or the other, or it might swing wildly between extremes. I could see any of those being possible because out of bounds planets, they can be, or out of bounds asteroids, they can be erratic like that because they don't have to function the way that they're supposed to. So they can kind of swing all over the place. Or there could be a swinging wildly between, or there could be a little bit of all of that at the same time. They're complex in that way. So I could totally see that being the case as well. And this being the case for all of the other asteroid goddesses that I'm going to talk about. This possibility for swinging to extremes, to picking one extreme over the other and staying there, to swinging between them, and even a merging or a melding of these extremes at the same time. Okay, so then there's Ceres out of bounds. Ceres out of bounds. So Ceres is nurturing, nurturing and nourishment and mothering. All of those things kind of fall under, they're kind of what Ceres represents in a nutshell. So when you see Ceres out of bounds, you might find somebody who is extremely nurturing, mothering, nourishing, all the way over to another extreme, which is somebody who does not relate to nurturing or mothering or nourishing or whatever. And this can be in this context, we could be talking about nurturing and mothering of oneself and just nurturing and mothering in general of other people. There could also be, some swinging between the two, between an abundance of it abundance of this or an excess all the way over to nothing dealing, like just completely shut off. Or there could be a little bit of both at different times in one's life, or emerging of these things at the same time. But definitely a more complex relationship with nurturing, mothering, nourishing, these sorts of series things. The relationship, out of bounds planets or out of bounds asteroids, out of bounds whatever, the relationship is more complex. The way that the person feels about those archetypes tends to be more complex. Just because there is a more layered, it can certainly be more layered than if it's imbalance due to the freedom and the liberation that planet or asteroid has. Pallas out of bounds. Pallas deals a lot with creative intelligence, with diplomacy. Also with, Pallas was a female, but she was more masculine. And when I talk about, masculine and feminine here, I am talking about energy. I'm not talking about gender or sex. I'm strictly talking about energy here. But she did have a more masculine energy. So I do feel like Pallas has a lot to do with actually wanting to blend the masculine and feminine energy inside of oneself. I think that's not what it's going to mean for everybody, but I do think that this can play in with Pallas, because I do think that that's what Pallas really wants, is that blending of the two. Also finding patterns and understanding them is definitely a Pallas thing as well. So if you've got Pallas out of bounds, you could have somebody who is incredibly creatively intelligent, like creative intelligence off the fucking charts. Extremely diplomatic, sees patterns and is able to read patterns all over the place, and understand them. You could even have somebody who, perhaps extremely relates to perhaps one sort of energy more than, here would probably be masculine, since Pallas did have a more masculine energy about her. Perhaps somebody who extremely relates to the masculine energy within them. I guess I could see how it could swing the, extremely relating to the female end of energy too. I could see that. I could see how that could happen. All the way over to, say on the other extreme end of things, somebody who, perhaps doesn't really see or understand patterns anywhere. Somebody who relates to one sort of energy over another, masculine or feminine, again, kind of like what I was talking about just a few seconds ago. Somebody who doesn't feel like they have any sort of creative genius, or doesn't know how, or creative intelligence, and doesn't know how to tap into it. I could see that being the case too with Pallas out of bounds. And perhaps even somebody who doesn't know how to tap into their diplomacy. I could see that being the case too. I could also see Pallas out of bounds, the person going from one extreme to the other at different times in their life. And I could even see a blending of the two at the same time, throughout their life as well. Because again, there is a complex, the out of bounds nature does add a complexity to the planet or asteroid involved. And then we have Juno. Now, Juno is one that I'm trying to think of off the top of my head. I can't remember if I've seen it out of bounds or not. I know I've seen the other three. I haven't read anywhere that it can't go out of bounds. So I'm pretty sure that it can, even though I don't remember off the top of my head seeing it. I think that it can. So I'm going to roll with that as if it can, because I'm pretty sure it can. But Juno deals a lot with commitment, like what we commit to, and those sorts of things. Jealousy is another one. Sorry, I have glitter in my eye. Jealousy is another one that Juno can deal with, which makes sense with her mythology. I get it. I totally get it. But Juno, if you got Juno out of bounds, you could have somebody who can extremely commit to things. Um, yeah, like I could just see the commitment being extreme and needing that and kind of functioning that way. I could even see something like jealousy being very extreme with somebody who has Juno out of bounds. All the way over to the other end of the spectrum where perhaps the person can't commit to anything, or they feel like other people can't commit to them. And perhaps somebody who never gets jealous, say they don't ever get jealous. I could see the person swinging from one extreme to the other at different points in their life, or even having both of those going on at the same time and all of those extremities kind of merging together. I could see that being I could see any of those being the case. Of course, you would want to take into consideration the sign that these asteroids are in, the house that they're in, any aspects that you want to count that they make. Definitely want to take all of those into consideration. And definitely take a look at the persona chart. And I would, with the asteroids out of bounds or with planets out of bounds, definitely take a look at the persona chart because it can give you an idea as to, how else they might function. Like as you delineate the natal chart and you're like, with out of bounds planets, it can be kind of like, I think it'll kind of go more this way or this way. But you really want to delineate the persona chart. Doesn't have to be any. My camera keeps I just noticed it keeps going in and out of focus. Sorry about that. But definitely do that because it does help to kind of give a better understanding of any planet in general, honestly. But definitely the ones that are out of bounds that might be a little harder to see how they function. Same thing with I'll say this also. Same thing with planets at the conjunct the galactic center, out of bounds. I've been looking at it seemed I think in my research it was 70 something percent of planets that were conjunct the GC were also out of bounds. So I've been using this approach. With persona charts with planets conjunct the GC too. I think it's pretty useful because planets conjunct the GC also feel like wild cards in the same way that out of bounds planets are like wild cards, or out of bounds asteroids, or out of bounds anything. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and head off. But if you ever want me to read for you or whatever, this kind of stuff, I mean, if you've got planets out of bounds or an asteroid out of bounds, and you're like, oh my God, I want to know more about this. Hit me up. We'll take a look at the persona chart. We'll look at it in your natal chart. We'll also take a look at it at its persona chart as well, because that's a fuckload of fun. But I'll put where you can find me below. I will link the other videos I mentioned below, and I will see you all later.